So I am a visual artist who uses textile techniques to create artwork. And in wondering how I got to this, it really started back when I was probably about 8 years old. I grew up pretty typically as little girls did, learning a lot of domestic skills. My mom taught me how to knit, and I wasn't particularly good at it, but because I was a obedient little girl, I learned how to knit and stuck with it, and learned how to do other things. I was in brownies and Girl Scouts, and there were always crafty projects using needlework, embroidered dish towels, and that sort of thing. And I also grew up with the idea that art was something that was, or being an artist was something that was bestowed upon someone. Like other people noticed, oh, you are artistic, therefore you should be an artist. And I was aware of some other people around me having that bestowed on them, but not me. And so I didn't take pursuing art as an option. And I did, however, study theater, but I always had this love of making things and interest in making things. And so as I went on doing other things for a career, I increasingly was drawn towards learning more skills that were related to textiles. So in particular, I learned how to, I saw somebody spinning when I was about 17 years old, and I thought that was just the coolest thing in the whole world, to have somebody take nothing and make it into yarn that then could be made into something. And so I learned how to spin, and I took other classes learning how to weave and basket making and paper making and all of the things related to the textile craft field. And still had this sense of wanting to be something more. And eventually actually what happened is I became interested in trying to make something more with all of the hand-spun yarn that I had. And I actually read a book on how to make a little pony. And through that, learned how to do three-dimensional knitting. So for a while, I was doing like craft fairs locally, selling little animals and teddy bears and dolls made out of my hand spun. But continuing to be very aware of what was going on in the textile art field with fiber art, and what was more dramatic and more interesting, and was trying to just teach myself that while not being too overt about it. Like I didn't really think to say enroll in a BFA or an MFA program or something, because that still seemed like too much in terms of that being for other people. But I persevered, and I actually saw, I was involved with a wearable art show that the National Hand Weavers Guild Conference Convergence was doing. And I had a bunch of friends who were hosting the convergence. It was all volunteer. And I was on the wearable art show committee. And there were these garments that came in by a woman named Carrie McDermott that were machine knit out of copper wire. And I just thought they were the coolest thing. I just loved it. And so I went down to the basement and I thought there must be some wire down here somewhere, and found some florist wire and started knitting with it, and really was drawn to the materials, how it was both rigid and transparent. So I just started experimenting with that, and went through a phase of doing hand spun and felt and knit wire, but was getting increasingly abstract. And this also was in conjunction as I was always trying to read about art and look at especially what was going on in the contemporary fiber art field, trying to stretch myself, trying to figure out what is it that I'm really wanting to do with this, but just loving the making, always loving the making. So knit wire kind of became my thing and is still probably the primary technique and process that I use. I find it really soothing and calming and meditative. And so I bring knitting with me everywhere I go because it's something for me to do if I'm just waiting, but also if I'm nervous or something. It's very soothing. As a sideline, there's been research done that shows that knitting is as effective at reducing blood pressure as meditation is. I think it's kind of a fun fact, although I think it must be very simple knitting because knitting can be really complicated and hard to do, especially for people trying to read patterns. But anyway, so I was because I kind of came from this doll viewpoint and the idea of art dolls, which I was interested in. My work was pretty figurative, but increasingly abstract. And I grew up spending a lot of time in nature, the family that camped all the time, and I was used to being outside, and I started to find myself drawn towards objects of nature that caught my attention. And so one of the first things that was kind of a transitional move for me is seeing these sticks that I thought looked like dancers. And so I started making knit wire around them and did this whole series of stick figures that I still work on from time to time. And I was intrigued with the whole idea of being a good drawer. Somebody who's good at drawing is one of the characteristics that endows one, in my opinion, that special artist achievement. And I was not good at drawing. And so in making the stick figures, I just liked how the sticks looked like dancers, but I also sort of liked the reference to the simplicity of stick figures. Since that was sort of a derogative term for not being able to draw, they just made stick figures. And then I also, less so now, but at the time I was also pretty interested in the psychological ramifications of and feminist issues around the female form and all of the long-standing art history and feminist discussions around that, of the objectification of women and the owning of female bodies and the dictating of what a female body should look like. So I also, in my stick figure series, there was also sort of a nod to anorexia and the whole issue of eating disorder, which pretty much only happens in first world rich countries where there's so much food that eating disorder can be an issue. But so that's kind of that chunk. And then in there I also was making some wearable art, again out of my interest in I'm really interested in the historical importance of textiles, and I believe that textiles really is what develops culture and names culture. And the oldest known garments were pieces of string twisted together, and they were then, and they occurred in quite a few cultures, and they were created as social signifiers. They really were indicating if a person was available for mating, if they were a young woman, if they were fertile. And so anyway, I just like that whole play because I still think fashion basically operates in all cultures today as social signifiers. And so that is something that I think is fun to play around with. And then with my use of the wire, I was really interested in how something could be both a sculpture and a piece of wearable art. So that's sort of a whole genre of work that I have done and still have some interest in. But what has happened in the last, more in the last 5 years, I would say, I have looked increasingly at, well, what is it that really is filling up my day? What do I end up talking with people about a lot outside of well, anyway, what do I end up talking with people about sort of within my family? And it went back to nature, and in particular, my son, who just came out of the womb loving biology, and all he cared about was observing nature, is an ecologist, and his wife is also an ecologist. And so a lot of our conversations just increasingly fascinated me with the link of how, as they talk about things trying to be scientifically accurate, it sounds so poetic to me, and it serves as metaphors for other things. And so I then increasingly thought about, well, what if I were to really do a big body of work focused on things that had to do with what I talk about with them. And that's where the piece that's sitting behind me came from, this body of work. Excuse me. That I ended up calling The Poetics of Evolution. And so that's sort of where I'm landed now, is with turning to them and their research and their conversations with me and bringing that into the work. And that feels like it brings together my liking to walk outside and continue to observe what's going on in nature around me and continue to see objects that look interesting to me, and then to alter them in a way that uses textile techniques, including often knitting. So I think that that's the end of the story of how I got to where I am at the moment.
The problem you mentioned at the beginning was this problem about being an artist and that designation coming from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you with that problem now? Are you easy with, yes, I'm an artist, or how does that sit with you?
Well, I think I am now. A couple of things happened. I know you did a piece in the Women's Art Institute, and that was a pretty pivotal experience for me. I didn't think I was qualified to do the Women's Art Institute, but I did the Women's Art Institute in 2007, so 8 years ago, I guess. And there was no question regarding my being able to be labeled an artist. And so that was very helpful. It was a scary thing to do. I then also, actually, the year after I did the Women's Art Institute, I was a teaching assistant for the Women's Art Institute, and I met the visiting artist that they bring in I was bringing in a national visiting artist, and she had been on some artist residencies, and so I got the idea in my head that I wanted to go to an artist residency. And I was accepted at an artist residency that I went to in 2010, and that was 5 years ago. And I'm actually going to return to the same artist residency in a week. And so I've been thinking about the last 5 years, and I was really terrified to go to this artist residency because I knew it would be very serious, very real artists who had legal claim to the term artist. And I was concerned that I would not have that term once I got there. And I, just opened myself up and did what I do. And between then and now, enough things have happened that I feel like I can sit comfortably with the term and can say with confidence that I am an artist. But it's been a long haul.
Was just reading reviews today from Elizabeth Gilbert's new book, which encourages people to work creatively in a variety of disciplines. Essentially, she's encouraging people to be you, given the range of things you've tried, the range of, and saying this is too important to be left to the people who are good at it. Right. This work is too important. And she's very clear. She's a writer, and that's what she's good at. And she also does poetry, and she also does various other kinds of things that perhaps go in drawers. And but so she's now written this book that's encouraging people to have a creative life, and to explore the ideas that come to them. It seems like that's what you've always done. I mean, that's been the way you've lived. Am I right?
Well, at least once I was probably in college. I think as a child I was still too restricted by my judgments of the judgments that, nobody ever, it wasn't like people were saying, oh my God, you're so horrible. I was very aware of who was being praised. And so it was around, and I did get praised for some things, but, I just had this idea that the people being praised should be who's doing things. And so if I did something and then didn't get praise or acknowledgement or something, then I was pretty quick to abandon it, even though I liked doing it. But when I got older, I got beyond that. Thank God.
So now do you do stuff you're bad at?
Yeah, definitely. I do stuff I'm bad at every day. Yeah. No, I mean, because it's, I feel like I'm a person who's not really good at most things, and so to do anything, I have to be relatively bad at it. There's a quote that has been misattributed to Oscar Wilde, and somebody once told me the person who really said it, and I can never remember his name, but the quote is, anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. And I like that, because I think it gives permission to counter that perfectionistic, if you're going to do it well kind of thing, and well, what the heck, if it's worth doing, do the best you can. And if it's not that good, who cares?
So,
And you can get better.
so maybe we can save people the $25 it would cost to buy Liz Gilbert's book. So what is creativity done for you?
Well, I honestly think it's and I kind of think that this can be true of most people. I mean, I think it's really interesting that once we get beyond basic needs of food and shelter, that people start to make things that are beyond function. I mean, they're even if they're making something functional, it's like people have always started to personally adorn things in a way that speaks to something. And I believe that there's this intrinsic knowing that we have that's linked to our creative selves, and that the more we pay attention to that and try and let it out, the better we feel, because it's I don't know, it's sort of like getting fed. So it's like you have the need to eat, and then you eat, and then that feels good. And it's like I think that this creative spark lingers in this. And I mean, I can even, I think of you, Peter, and the little bit that I know, but it's like you had this desire to make videos, and you just did it. And I think that there are all kinds of people who have the urge to do things that are different than the urge that other people have. And that the closer we pay attention to that, the more we become ourselves. So I feel like what creativity has done for me is make life exciting for me. Make me, want to get up in the morning. Make me want to observe. I mean, and I do think that's one of the primary functions of art is, one of the main things that I think that an artist does is improve their observation skills, and in their artwork they help others to observe. So they bring a point of view, whether it's the words or the sound of the music or the visual representation of something that helps people to see. And I just think that engages us with who we are, and also can engage us with who other people are.
For some people, I think creative production is a very private matter.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, on the extreme end, you have Emily Dickinson up in her little room, and for other people, it's kind of it's a step to connection, a step to dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
How is it with you?
Well, I think that it certainly began as a private matter, but I had the urge to have it be public, and I think that I did want it to. I want a dialogue within the artistic community as part of it, but I think I also just wanted a certain amount of dialogue around. This is who I am. I want to share with you something that matters to me, and I want to engage you in hoping that you respond to it. And at a really personal level, I love seeing artwork that excites me and interests me, and I just want to experience it viscerally, and I want to know more about the person who is the artist. And so it's really thrilling to me if that ever happens to me with somebody looking at my artwork, and then I want people to think about craft and textiles and the place that plays in culture, but then I also like sparking conversations about science and the environment and evolution, and I don't want to be proselytizing at all, but I am interested in, I really like it if something that I brought into a work of art also makes somebody think about something having to do with science and the evolution of the world. Can't even remember what the questions are by the time I get to my pause.
I have a friend down by Wyndham who's a longtime practicing artist, and he started out selling plants for his father in a little greenhouse, and so he did plants that were also sort of mythical figures with dramas going on between them. Did this for some years, I think, and then he moved on to grain bins. And the grain bin phase has now been years and years and isn't over. But he's added wind turbines to the mix. So all through this town and all through the spaces he controls, and he controls a lot of space, are talking plants and grain bins and wind turbines. It's like, I have to work this out, maybe in 10 years I'll move on to the next thing. But it raises a question, how do you decide when it's time to move on? You could still be doing those 3D teddy bears.
Right? Oh, yeah. When to move on is a really interesting question. I think I don't know. That's interesting to me because I have seen a lot of other friends and artists who have, say for instance, done stained glass, and then they've sold all their stained glass equipment. They're just done with it. And or they were painters and now they're only doing welding and throw out all their paints. And I've never understood the clarity of that. Maybe I lean a little towards hoarding, I don't know, but I still like to dabble in things, and so, but I will say that the move from teddy bears to what I'm doing now is pretty different. And I think, although I do think those teddy bears are really cute, it's so darn intuitive, I think, at least for me. Some people really plan it out, now I need to learn X, Y, Z, and I'm going to do that instead. And I work really intuitively, and so I just have a sense of noticing what I really like. And so, for instance, I don't think I'm ever going to do something like cast bronze, even though I can admire cast bronze because it just doesn't feel like something that I want to do. But I can imagine, and I don't want to do turbines either. But I still get exposed to things that I think that I just have a big reaction to, and I think, I want to work more like that. And so I think that's part of it. And so to back up and answer to the question, I think one of the things that is really important for us to do as people and as artists is pay attention to what catches our attention. Because what catches our attention is something that I think is somewhat unique to us and that fuels us. So when I see artwork that is really interesting to me, I like to think about, sometimes I just think it's cool and I know I'm not going to do it, but sometimes there's aspects of it that I like to analyze. What is it that is drawing me in so much, and is there something about that I should be bringing to my artwork, or not should, but that I want to bring to my artwork? Because my favorite self-assessment for my artwork is kind of a joke that I always say to my husband, which is, if somebody else had made that, I would think it was really cool. And so if I'm seeing something in somebody else's work that I think is really amazing, that I think is within my reach without being derivative of their work, because it's not like I want to steal somebody's ideas or anything, but can expand my work, then I think it's time to broaden out. And I think that the move from teddy bears on was really about the permission to make something that was less folksy and more arty.
Yeah. Yeah, Dave in Wyndham says, I realized after drawing plants for a while that I had a degree in fine arts, damn it. So
Oh, yeah.
I moved on to grain pins. It's like, this is a serious topic. This isn't fooling around anymore. Well, does courage come in here at all?
Oh God, yes.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, no, I used to joke that it's like, well, this was over this whole progression of feeling like it was okay to do art. It was like I'd rather tell you about my sex life than show you a drawing. You know, it's like it really has been the scariest thing for me, because I thought I was in turf that was so out of my league. And I mean, even as I say that now, this is where I have really arrived at a different spot now, but I feel the emotion, and I'm not going to start to cry, but there have been many times where I could not say what I just said without starting to tear up. And yeah, so I feel like it's the bravest thing I've ever done, is decide to pursue my version of creativity. And when I mentioned I was really scared to go to the Women's Art Institute, but and I did. I cried practically every day there, just out of out of good stuff, out of the excitement of like, I get to do this. And when I went to the artist residency that I went on, I was terrified about everything. I was like terrified to. They had nights where you show slides of your work, and I was just terrified. And they had these visiting guest artists who were, in every single major collection in the world, and you could sign up to meet with them, and I was terrified to do that. But I got through all of that, and it was all really positive. And there's the whole success in the art world that's just an impossible ball of wax unto itself. But for the most part, all artists care about other artists is that they're striving to do what they're compelled to do, and that they're doing it. And that if you can, put together a cogent sentence about why you do what you're doing, the vast majority of artists will say, right on, go for it, But it is, I mean, the fact that I'm sitting here talking to you is courageous. And I know that I am, I mean, I did study theater, and so I am capable of being in public and defying the inner turmoil. But I do feel pretty comfortable, but I felt really vulnerable doing this, you know, talking about my art.
I have a friend who's an actor, or was an actor, pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point she had a family and was kind of at some sort of a crossroads. And the advice she got was, if you can not do it, don't.
Oh, yeah.
And I wonder if that resonates with you. I mean, is there something about this that is a certain kind of a burden? I mean, she decided, I mean, with really very promising stuff ahead of her, that she could let it go, and she did. You know, and took off for another life. Is there an aspect of the stuff as a burden for you also?
Well, I think, I mean, I would say mostly no, because I think that it's people, I do think it's people who have been gifted with the wand of you're really, really good at this, who end up letting it go, honestly. I don't know if that's true, but that, I mean, this is a thought that I haven't had before, so I'm just thinking that right now. But what is burdensome is the physicality of well, actually, I was going to say the physicality of striving. And so let me say that I do think it is a bit of a burden to live one's life with constant striving. I strive a lot. And, you know, and I think for all the reasons I said, you know, when you're surrounded by, you know, I've always been in a family where there are geniuses, and when you're not one, even if you might have lots of attributes approaching it, I think it makes for striving, you know, especially if you're sort of ignored in it all, you know, and but it's kind of burdensome. I mean, like, I think that actually years ago I saw this card that said, happy birthday, you've reached the age that precludes striving. And I gave it to a friend who was turning 30. And I'm thinking, oh my God, you can't stop striving at 30. When does one? 80? Maybe 80 is the age that precludes striving. But so that's one part of the burdensomeness of it. But the other part that has to do with the physicality is that in striving to make work that is engaging, size is an issue. I mean, and it's like hauling around things and hanging things, and the burden of the physical labor of a lot of artwork is a lot. So I would say that is a burden, a literal burden. You know, I have a friend a really good friend who makes art all the time, and he keeps it pretty private, although he's not adverse to an interested friend talking about it. But he does I guess mostly what you could call altered drawings and collage art. And there's a simplicity to him just doing it and enjoying it and not having to worry about hanging and framing it or it going anywhere else. And I seem to feel compelled to want my work to be in the public. And that's kind of weird to me.
Yeah. My friend would always threaten to dedicate his thesis from Harvard to his Nobel quality chemist cousins, without whom this would not have been necessary.
Oh, yeah.
Sounds like you have some people in your family with that, you know, who might rate a similar kind of dedication.
They actually all turned out to be underachievers, but you know, a child's perception can be a curse forever.
Yeah.
So, but oh, I love that. I love that. Yeah, yeah.
Well, do you carry a family legacy?
Let's say that again.
I said, do you carry a family legacy?
Not one that is famous.
But I mean one that's real. I mean, are you carrying forward some energy from someplace earlier?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, in fact, my mother in embarrassingly honest quotes have said, like, and to think you're the one we never thought anything of.
The stone that the builders rejected.
Yes. Yeah. I have some solace in it. Actually, my mother also said about my best friend, and who we've been friends actually since first grade. And she has 3 children, and one of them is an artist, and one of them is a marvelous cellist, and the other one is a physician. And my mother, when a few years ago, said, and to think, the parents are nothing. So I love telling that story to my friend over and over, giving them grief.
Parents
are nothing. The father, at any rate, is an attorney, which I thought that garnered some academic success, but.
Well, are you somehow or other passing the legacy on? I mean, do you have kids or mentees or whatever?
Well, I actually do have mentees, but I don't think of that as passing the legacy on. I just think of that as being really privileged to help people who are interested in this. I have one child, my son, who's really bright, and and that's who I collaborate with. So I feel like genetically I've passed on good genes, and he's just finishing his PhD in ecology and evolutionary biology. But he's a wonderfully laid-back guy and has never had any need to prove anything to anybody. So I don't see him getting the Nobel Prize or anything. He'll do what he thinks is interesting and wonderful, and so I think that that's been passed on too, that he should please himself. Please himself before pleasing others. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I can imagine a life from here on forward as a string of explorations with one thing leading to another, from a show you would see or a book you read or someone you meet or so forth. Mm-hmm. But I'm wondering also if you have any picture floating on the horizon of what you have to do to make it, or what success looks like, or what a work looks like, or how everyone wants to put
that out there. No, it's funny. Quite a few years ago, I think it was 1998 to be precise, the Minnesota Historical Society purchased a piece of mine for their collection. And I remember a friend saying to me, sort of like a friend who was also an artist, saying like, well, you better enjoy it because that's probably going to be it. That'll be the peak experience. And I have gone on to have, a handful of what I consider kind of really, cool peak experiences. So I'm trying to really enjoy what I've gotten, and not, so to let success be what success is right now. And so I'm really trying to live with success being that I keep on making the work that means something to me. It would be great if I could occasionally sell things. Because the basement,
note the website on the bottom of your screen.
That's right. It's like the basement's not that big in the house. But so sort of like if I could sell enough things to sort of maintain the space to keep making more things and to fund the making of things, that'd be great. So that would be one measure of success. But it's it's so hard. Did you know about this hand and glove conference going on that the Soap Factory's doing?
No, I don't know that.
Well, so this weekend, and I haven't had the time to go to it, but Soap Factory, the Soap Factory? Yeah. They and something called Works Progress, which is maybe out of Ohio, but I'm not sure about that, are putting on this big conference. It's called Hand and Glove, and it's all about looking at artist-centric practices and how artists revitalizing the community to make art happen outside, in particular, I think the traditional art institutions that are so profoundly limited. So, as I said, I actually haven't been able to go to this conference, and my internet has actually been down all week, and so I haven't been able to read the many readings that they have been posting in conversation about this. But there's definitely been an upswing of people looking at things like deserted buildings or buildings being renovated, and the whole downtown window space made here thing of utilizing empty buildings to do art. So I am also interested in thinking about how to do that. Although the truth be told that a lot of the people that are really involved in that are extremely credentialed artists. I just went to Alma Restaurant locally. While they're doing their renovation, they invited a number of artists to come in and make artwork. I went to their opening on Wednesday. But the artists that were there were really pretty high-profile artists with pretty wonderful track records. So getting in on that isn't necessarily just kind of a Joe Blow kind of thing. But the other thing that I have done that I have been interested in is a few years ago I decided to start doing my own little private public art experiments. And so I would make sculptures sort of hidden in nature, but also kind of apparent along the paths that I walk every day. And I want to do more of that. That has been really fun, and there's been a couple of times when I've met people who've seen the artwork and then have been excited. The best thing was I have a studio in the Cascade Arts Building, which is in Northeast Minneapolis, and I participated in Art of World, and there was a little girl. I was sitting knitting wire, and there was a little girl who was like 8 years old or something like that, and she, was kind of tugging on her mother and whispering to her mother, and her mother's kind of nudging her up. And then the two of them came up to me and said, "Are you the person that had a sculpture, that was in blah, blah, blah area?" And I was like, "Yes, I am. Did you?" And when they first started talking, I thought they were going to, there's another artist who knits a lot with wire locally, that people often confuse my work with theirs. And she actually does a lot of knit dolls. But anyway, I was all set to say, no, that wasn't me. But anyway, I was like, well, that was me. And then the mother said, "Oh, my daughter loved that. When we walk home from Fulton School, I think it was, she said, we always take this special path out of the way in order to go buy your sculpture because my daughter loved it so much." And like that's just golden. That's super cool. Now, somebody came by and took all the wire. It was copper wire. It was also some aluminum wire, and somebody took it all. But I thought, oh well, that's kind of part of the experiment. I don't know if somebody did something with the wire, or they, sold the copper or what. But I like that idea. And I mean, it would be it would be kind of cool to do some public art stuff, but that's also talking about burden. That's, structurally it's got to be so permanent and complicated that, that's something to get into. But I do really like this idea. And when you asked about courage, I spent, I think it was the winter of, I think it might have been the winter of 2011, for 4 months walking by a path thinking, I should hang a sculpture there, but I don't dare. And not like in a get arrested kind of way, in a exposing myself vulnerably as an artist kind of way. And so then I did it, and anyway, now I think it's kind of fun too. And I feel courageous about it. Now I would be more concerned about the park board finding me or something. Because you're not supposed to mess, I don't think, with public property without permission. But anyway.
Yes, practicing sculpture without a license.
Right.
I love it.
Right.
Well, going back to conversations I've had with my friend Dave in Wyndham, I mean, it matters a lot to him that he lives in Wyndham.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also wondering about maybe living someplace else because, he is the artist. Not quite. There are other folks around, but, he's the person who gets mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Minneapolis is, of course, the big pond.
Yeah.
But it's also, in important ways, a small pond.
Right.
From a number of different angles. So how do you think about where you live and where you travel? I mean, knowing that traveling or living in another place is pretty close to certain to change your life. Right.
Well, I mean, I do love Minneapolis. I mean, and it has been a really good, it's an amazing community in general for fiber arts. And so, I mean, it's like, I actually was living in Portland, Oregon when I learned how to weave and well, I was actually living in Eastern Washington when I learned how to spin. I was teaching high school, and one of my students' grandmother was a spinner. But then I moved to Portland, and the Portland Parks and Recreation system teaches weaving, which I think is kind of intriguing. But then I moved to Minneapolis, and the Minneapolis has had places like the Weavers Guild, which has been a really important foundation in me learning textile. And then the Textile Center got founded, which is incredibly supportive of all of the textile-based techniques, and increasingly interested in contemporary art that's using textile form. And then now the American Craft Council has relocated to Minneapolis. So from a textile viewpoint, this is a really wonderful place to be. And people like to talk about how cool Minneapolis is for the art scene. So that is true. I love the park system. I love stepping out of my door and being able to walk on trails that are shoveled all winter. However, I think if I were where I am now in my artistic life and were significantly younger, I would probably try living in New York, because things, I mean, there's no doubt that things happen because of the place you're in. And I mean, if you're in New York doing things, things can end up happening that just can't happen here. I mean, I just think that that's a fact, you know. I still would really like to live in Italy. That's been a long dream. I was thinking about it this morning. And maybe I will. I don't know. I love Italian. You know, I'd really like to live somewhere where I could speak a foreign language. So I'm not gonna. But anyway, and when I've been lucky that I've had a couple people close to me who've been living in Manhattan, and so I've gone to New York more in the last few years, and I mean, it is an incredible education artistically. So I mean, I just love going and seeing what's going on there, and but because I am married to somebody who is not all that adventurous, I probably won't be, you know, picking up and moving to New York anytime soon, or, you know. But on the other hand, if my son were to live somewhere longer term, and his wife, for their career, it's conceivable that that would be a motivation to see more of them, to perhaps relocate closer to them. But otherwise, you know, it's like there's a lot of places I'd like to travel to. And, you know, I'm at an age where I have to, you know, money is critical, and so I don't know. I'm thinking I probably won't, you know, places that I maybe would have gone to, I won't probably go to, but then on the other hand, there's, you know, some places I would like to go to.
Well, one thing, just as a last question, one thing that comes to mind is places where textile arts and the things that you've done are absolutely artistically central.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, where people are wearing works of art.
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
and there, you know, thousands of weavers.
Right.
Who are representing family traditions that go back farther than you can imagine. I mean, there've got to be still places like that, right?
Right. Well, there are, and I mean, in one place, and I have been there. I was there years ago, actually. Is like Guatemala. You know, I mean, and it's like when I was there, there was in fact, and I was there actually to study. Let's see, I was there with, let's see, what was it called? Education for Global Justice. It was to learn about third world development that was being done by residents of Guatemala and Honduras. But anyway, well, while I was there happened to be a Miss Indigenous contest going on. And the competition was all of these people who were of Mayan descent and wearing their native traditional garments that they had woven. And so at that time, and it's less true now, but still true to a degree, that, you know, every single Mayan descended community had particular colors, particular leaf structures, particular techniques that were what they did. You know, there were things that the men wove that the men wore, and things that the women wove that the women wore, and so. But anyway, so that is a place. You know, there are certainly communities in many countries of Africa where that's true, and places in India where that's true. But honestly, for me at this point, I'm more interested at this juncture in contemporary art that's using textile techniques. And so, like this, I was actually in New York last month, and the Guggenheim has this retrospective show of an artist named Dorothy Salcedo, who really is working with issues of injustice. But she has these incredible pieces. There were two different bodies of work that I thought were amazing. One was shoe boxes that she had constructed that were shoes from people that had gone missing from the regime of the government, that then were covered with gut, which is a material I like to use, and then sewn with sutures. And then she had these other pieces that were related to the same topic, but that were all made out of strands of silk and sewing needles. Like, I find that intersection of contemporary art really exciting. So I'd be more likely to go somewhere where I could see things like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.